A few years ago, something weird happened that changed the way I looked at the internet forever. At the time, I was studying for an anatomy exam that I had later that week, when all of a sudden I started to get random emails from eBay saying, "Thank you for your purchase," which was weird because I hadn't even bought anything. I opened these emails and discovered that somebody had been purchasing random items using my PayPal account and sending them to themselves. And this wasn't all. Each purchase that they made took money from my account, eventually draining my account to zero. You see, this was a huge problem at the time because this was all the money I had as a student. And now because of this random person buying these random things, I was now in trouble. I had become the victim of an online cyber attack. And you see, the thing is, I thought I had it pretty bad. But on the 24th of November 2020, thousands of people all over the country of Finland received a mysterious email, similar to the one I received. But this time, these emails were from a mysterious contact.
They started to send these emails out with the help of a script. They modified it so that it had the person's name, birth date, and their social security number.
And the content of these emails were simple but potent. The email stated that a psychiatry and therapy-based firm called Vastamo had just been hacked. And as a result, the hacker now had thousands of patient data in his possession.
31,980 records in the database, and almost all of them are real people, including children. We have to keep in mind just how horrible this is.
The hacker asked that €200 be sent to a personalized Bitcoin address in exchange for deleting the files.
Within 3 days, if there is no payment, the ransom man will release the information they have on the specific victim online.
And now there are just two questions on everybody's mind. How on earth did this happen? And who could be evil enough to do something like this?
Daedalus was still a genius inventor. While observing the birds that circled his prison, the means for escape became clear. He and Icarus would fly away from their prison as only birds or gods could do.
Finland is often celebrated as one of the happiest countries on earth, regularly topping the World Happiness Report year after year.
If money can't buy you happiness, bring you happiness, maybe a trip to Finland will.
But despite this, like many other countries, Finland isn't immune from the silent struggles of mental health.
But then when you measure happiness with like positive emotions, like joyfulness and how much do you smile every day and so forth.
Where is Finland on that scale?
Not close to the top at all.
In 2008, one man saw an opportunity to completely transform how mental health is treated in Finland.
Penkillä on Ville Tapio.
Ville Tapio, an entrepreneur, noticed that whilst Finland's healthcare was strong, it was still hampered by long wait times, stigmas, and a sense of inaccessibility. His answer to that? Vastamo.
Mutta myös samaan aikaan meillä on yhteiskunnallinen tavoite, eli parantaa psykoterapiapalveluiden saatelua.
From the very start, Vastamo set out to break the mold. Instead of hiding therapy clinics in back alleys, Vastamo put their clinics right on the main streets, visible, approachable, and unmistakably modern. It was definitely a bold move, making mental health support as accessible and as common as a quick bite. But you see, they didn't just stop there. They eventually partnered up with a TV show called
Kummalliset kammot,
which featured everyday Finnish people dealing with their deepest and darkest fears with the help of therapy, eventually turning therapy into something relatable, or possibly even something admirable, turning what was once a private struggle into a public conversation.
Isommassa kuvassa parantaa ihmisten elämänlaatua ja vähentää mielenterveysongelmista yhteiskunnalle aiheutuvia kustannuksia ja yksilöille aiheutuvia inhimillisiä kärsimyksiä.
And even further, Vastamo decided to try and solve another major issue. You see, at the time, many therapists had to deal with a lot of administrative burden, and Vastamo tried to simplify this by creating an easy-to-use online platform that made it easier for mental health professionals to schedule their appointments or even take notes. By 2018, Vastamo had 25 locations and employed hundreds of therapists, delivering sessions both in person and online, eventually becoming the envy of many mental health startups across Europe. The story was simple, but compelling. A young company leveraging technology to democratize mental health, boost the satisfaction of the people that work there, and grow at breakneck speed. By all accounts, Vastaamo seemed unstoppable, a shining example of Finnish innovation in the healthcare sector. But as we'll soon discover, the same digital leap that powered their success also left them vulnerable in ways no one ever anticipated. The seeds of this vulnerability were sown throughout these early years, long before the public realized what was truly at stake.
So we did the investigation and identified at least 2 unauthorized accesses.
We now know that in November 2018, there was a first breach of data. This happened because
the database didn't have a password, so the root account was there out for grabs.
But we could really recover any signs of activity other than a login and then an exit.
But in 2019, March, another hack happened.
At that time, there was somebody who was active doing these drive-by extortions. They would go to Showdown or whatever and scan a bunch of MySQLs and then try to log into those using default credentials, brute forcing their way in. And when they managed to get in,
the data was destroyed.
And there was even a note found on the server
asking for 40 bitcoins with the threat of exposing the information that they now possessed.
This is somebody on GitHub complaining about the fact that their database is lost. And this is the exact same message that appeared on Vastaamo's server on the 15th of March in 19.
So obviously the company knew something was off.
There's no way that, for example, Ville Tapio did not know that this happened at that time.
So they realized that this thing is going on and they recreated the database, and then they realized that their MySQL port is open to the internet, so they close it. And they added some security software.
But then nothing happened for a year. This became public in September 2020, which is when the attacker, who then called himself with the nickname Ransom Man, started posting information about the victims on a website he had set up in the Tor Hidden Service, and he announced this to the world through Reddit and through Finnish language forums, where he informed the media and the victims and everyone else that this breach has happened and that he has been already ransoming the company, and now he wants to put the pressure on the company by publishing part of the information.
Releasing 100 records per day, and the plan was to build up pressure.
At this point, there were a lot of civil movements that started. On Twitter, for example, there were these hashtag I won't read, hashtag I won't share movements. People were actively saying that, yeah, we will not read, we will not share, we are not interested in your information.
But the thing I'm watching for is like when do they catch the guy? Because I want to know when they catch the guy. Because that is what really interests me. Because I want to put a name on the nemesis.
Naturally, the days rolled by.
Until was it the 3rd or 4th day when he accidentally blotted out the whole database?
Yep. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th day, he managed to do a mistake while posting information on his Tor Hidden server, and he accidentally posted a file which was basically a backup of his attack server. So it included the full patient database because it was stored on the server itself. So he leaked the crown jewels, the things he was trying to make money with.
The bad thing about this was that now anyone on the internet could have had the same patient records. At this point, we had no idea who could start ransoming Vastaamo and the victims next.
So when you're running sort of a ransom operation, one of the things is that you have leverage and then you have a victim. If you lose your leverage, really hard to victimize the victim because they've been victimized at that point. So the web server disappears. He still tries this last-ditch effort because he has everybody's email address. So he sends all of the patients an email with a personalized ransom message, like, pay me and I will remove your files.
So you see, I've been researching the story for a while now, and sometimes I still find it hard to believe what I'm reading. And that's because one person, like presumably working alone, was holding thousands of people ransom simply because he had access to personal information that he should have never had access to in the first place. This was absolutely terrifying, and I can only imagine what the victims of this data breach were going through. I think it would be an understatement to say that the people of Finland were absolutely shaken, but something had to be done. They had to find out who did this. So remember when Ransom Man leaked his whole database? Investigators quickly jumped on it because this was a huge source of evidence. And when they had a look at it, they discovered that the patient files in the database were only dated up to 2018, which means that the data was most likely extracted during the November 2018 attack, Vastamo's initial breach. But you see, the data in the database wasn't just patient records. The hacker's whole home folder was in this database as well, complete with the very tools that were used to carry out this attack. Authorities were then able to search through Ransom Man's home folder, which eventually led them to a few more clues. Firstly, investigators found an IP address that eventually led them to a few server farms, one being held in Helsinki, further hinting at the fact that the perpetrator is likely Finnish. The authorities were then able to confiscate these servers and look through their activity. When looking through this activity, investigators were able to find a log of around the time frame that Ransom Man leaked the whole database. And when looking through this activity, they were able to observe that after Ransom Man leaked the data by accident, he quickly copied the files to another location before completely wiping the data. However, in the rush of all this, he made one critical error. He logged in without a VPN, which completely exposed an unmasked IP address. Investigators eventually traced this IP address back to an apartment in London, and then by looking at online activity that was linked to either this apartment or this IP address, investigators were able to find various online payments, such as payments towards hotel stays, and even some payments towards an OnlyFans creator. And just like that, bit by bit, Ransom Man was starting to look a bit more human. But this wasn't all. Another IP address that was found in the server logs eventually led investigators to an apartment in Barcelona. Interestingly, this apartment was registered under the name of someone called Daniel Fulgescu, who supposedly owned a BMW 7 Series. Now, this is a photo of the car that's registered under Daniel Fulgescu, along with its license plate. But interestingly, this photo appeared under a 5-star review of an auto detailing shop. However, the name of the person who wrote the review was not Daniel Fulgescu. It was a person called Alex Anteri K. But the digital trail didn't end there. Back when Ransom Man was making threats to leak people's data, negotiators sent a 0.1 Bitcoin payment to the wallet that was listed in his email. After the payment was received, Ransom Man converted this Bitcoin into Monero. Then he moved the funds to a Binance account before converting it back into Bitcoin. Usually these transactions would have been almost impossible to trace, but thanks to the wealth of evidence that Ransom Man had accidentally leaked, investigators were able to close a few gaps that they otherwise would have never been able to. And following on from this, investigators were able to find out that the 0.1 Bitcoin payment that he had made had eventually landed into the bank account of
Mr. Julius Kivimäki has a 10-year history of various hacks. He started as very young. He was hanging around with internationally known hacking groups like HTP or Lizard Squad.
This is the group responsible for hacking 2 of the biggest computing companies in the world and stopping more than 150 million people from playing their games consoles this Christmas. The group, calling themselves Lizard Squad, attacked Sony and Microsoft, closing down online services. Why? Why did you do this? It affected so many people. It ruined Christmas for potentially millions of people.
Why we did it? One of the big aspects here was raising awareness regarding the low state of computer security at these companies.
Do you not feel guilty that you've taken so much enjoyment of gaming away from more than 100 million people over this Christmas period?
We'd be rather worried if those people didn't have anything better to do than play games on their consoles on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day.
He's been in at least 2 cases where he's made bomb threats on airplanes, which have then been met with fighter jet and escorted to do emergency landings to search for bombs which are not on the planes in order to cause hassle for some key people who happen to be on those planes. So highly unusual individual who has been active in the online underground for quite a while. Quite unusual for a Finnish hacker. We don't have cases like this usually.
However, even though they now had a primary suspect, they couldn't arrest him yet because nobody actually knew where he was. But what was baffling was that even though he was now a fugitive, he was still living it up on social media. His feeds were full of photos of luxury cars and exotic getaways and a high-end lifestyle. He was even throwing cheeky replies on Reddit. It was almost as if he was daring people to catch him. And despite all of this, they still couldn't find him. But then something really strange happened. At around 7:20 a.m. on the 3rd of February 2023, local police close to the Courbevoie area close to Paris were responding to a domestic violence alert at a local apartment block. The woman that had made the call met the police outside the apartment and told them that her friend and her friend's husband were inside the apartment, that the three of them had been out late at a nightclub the previous night, that at some point during the night a fight broke out, and that now the woman was worried for her friend's life. So the officers knocked on the door. But when nobody answered, they forced entry into the apartment with a battering ram. Inside, they discovered a couple still recovering from the night before. It was a scene that seemed almost ordinary. But when asked for their passports, the husband produced a passport under the name Asam Amet, which claimed that he was Romanian. Yet standing in front of them was a tall man with blonde hair and green eyes. A discrepancy that, whilst not impossible, was enough to set off some alarm bells. A quick scan of their database of wanted fugitives revealed the truth. The man standing in front of them was actually Julius Kivimäki, using a fake passport. And it wasn't long before he was extradited to Finland to face trial. The trial was one of Finland's most profiled cases in a long time, and was closely followed by Finnish media.
Tulossa on selvästi yksi Suomen rikoshistorian laajimmista oikeudenkäynneistä.
Hundreds of victims tuned in, some from movie theaters, to watch the man that allegedly caused them so much pain finally face justice.
Eli syyttäjät oli vaatinut sen maksimituomion tosiaan 6 vuotta. Siltä osin, että tämä on päivän selvää, että tähän puolustus ei varmasti tule tähän tyytymään. Eli tähän menee hovioikeuteen, voi jo tässä vaiheessa sanoa. Eli tämä ei ole vielä lainvoimainen tuomio. Ja käräjäoikeudessa määräsi nyt Kivimäen pidettäväksi edelleen vangittuna. Eli hän ei pääse vapaalta nyt sitten vastaamaan ja odottamaan hovioikeuden käsittelyä, joka sitten aikanaan varmasti tulee. Vastaamo tietomurrosta epäilty 26-vuotias Julius Kivimäki istuu tutkintavankeudessa täällä Vantaan vankilassa. Kivimäki, sinua epäillään tästä Suomen rikoshistorian ehkä suurimmasta jutusta, jos uhreja tässä ajattelee yli 33 000 uhria, niin mitä ajattelet noista epäilystä?
On vaikea ymmärtää, miten ne kohdistuu juuri minuun. Siellä on kuitenkin 10 muuta ihmistä, joihin nämä samat varsin heikot materiaalit vois sopia yhteen.
To this day, despite all the evidence against him, Kivimäki still denies any involvement in this hack and currently plans to appeal the verdict. Vastaamo also wasn't spared from any judgment. After all, their poor level of security was what allowed the hack to happen in the first place. As a result, they were eventually fined €608,000. However, at this point, Vastaamo had already filed for bankruptcy and had sold itself to an occupational therapy chain. Prior to this, Vastaamo was sued by a company called Intera Partners, who had bought a stake in Vastaamo without being told that these data breaches had ever happened. Ville Tapio, the CEO, was fired from his position not long after the breach went public, and subsequently he was eventually given a 3-month suspended sentence for his role in the breach. He also plans to appeal this ruling. However, these punishments pale in comparison to the pain and suffering that the victims had to go through.
Nevertheless, the actual concrete amount of money the attacker was able to walk away with was a few thousand euros.
Yeah, this crime didn't pay off.
No. The damage was a million times larger than the money made for it.
And obviously the data has now been leaked and it's still there. It's impossible to ever get it off.
For many, life will never go back to the way it was before. And for some others, their lives as they knew it ended the moment these leaks became public. I wish I could say that there is a happy ending to this story, but there isn't. So many things went wrong in so many different ways. But I believe it's a story that needs to be told, because I believe it illustrates the power of something that we use almost every day, but we've only started to recently understand. The power of something that's quickly becoming one of the most powerful resources of our modern world. The power of data.